Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Today with Dave Koken of Covers.com for this Friday, the 25th of October 2019 on the Our Football Radio Network. At ourlads.com, the king of online football depth charts and college football scouting. And brought to you by, in part, by Covers.com, the most convenient and entertaining source for sports news and facts with over 45 million visits a year. Dave, good to talk to you again. How's everything going?
Everything's all right, Greg. Looking forward to a fun weekend. There's some good matchups, and should be an entertaining weekend for sure. And I know you're looking forward to the weekend because of the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, it's nervous time because it's one of those things where, of course, it's great that you're winning every game, but it's one of those things where even if they win tonight, I'm still going to be nervous that what happens if they lose? What happens when they lose that first game that they haven't lost in so long? How do they react from that? So that's what really makes me nervous.
Well, there's a simple way to avoid that. Just don't lose any games, and they might not.
I hope not. It's one of those. It's one of those things where you don't want to think too much about anything until the series is over and you've won, hopefully. But I understand as a handicapper and analyst that there's no question that when a team just seems to have whatever it is, that kind of magic or that kind of the way that they coexist with one another, it's a great thing to behold as a fan. And I want them to win so bad because I could see how much they love playing together, and I think it's a great story. And you want it to end the right way, but they've never won before, and until they win it, it's not a done deal.
There you go.
All right, Dave. So let's talk about this week. And we only have one game in the books. That was last night. But SMU continues to be undefeated. It didn't get through very easily, but a win's a win, especially in the tough AAC. And when you're trying to be that one team out of the group of five that gets the New Year's Six bowl game. You got a game tonight that we'll get to in a little while. That's the Pac-12 game. But let's start off in the SEC. And you've got the LSU-Auburn game, which is a really good game.
Oh, boy, yeah.
This is what we've talked about before. There are so many good games and matchups coming up over the next few weeks. It's just going to be really hard for any of these teams to remain undefeated. I like Auburn in this game. I even think they got a shot, obviously, in my mind, to win because of the rivalry. The games have been close recently. I think LSU is a better team. I've had them all year as a championship sleeper. I love the way they're playing. But I look and I say, you know what? If there's going to be a week that maybe they do lose, like what we've seen the last few weeks from these undefeated teams, maybe this is the week. So I'm kind of a little nervous about this one if I'm an LSU fan.
I would be nervous. Auburn's a really dangerous team. And as far as the points go in this game, I'd have to look at taking the Auburn side.
Yes.
If you can find teams this deep in the season that run for better than 200 yards per game and allow less than 100 yards per game on the ground, they make very live underdogs. And all the pressure is on LSU here.
Yes.
I think this is going to be a really close game, and I would look to be taking the points in this game.
Yeah, I agree. And what I did was, and I have a certain formula that I do with my picks every week, and that is that even though I'll throw in upsets, outright upsets to the money line, sometimes there's, well, not sometimes, but yeah, every week, I'd say about 80% of the upsets are games where I think they might be able to win. It's not it's not the game where I'm going, oh yeah, that's my pick, that's my upset. It's like I think they got a shot, so statistically speaking, I'm going to put them in there, and that's what I did with Auburn and another team we'll get to in a little bit. I decided, hey, if I get one of these two to upset, then I'm making money. But before we get to that other team, let's get to the other games in the SEC that I wanted to go over, and I did want to talk about South Carolina, Tennessee, because Tennessee seems like a completely different team when that kid plays Maurer, even though he's going to make mistakes. He's a young kid. But you could just tell they're a much more confident team when he's under center. And the fan base is so sick and tired of the other guy that I don't know what's going to happen here because we know Maurer's not going to play. But I really like the way South Carolina has been playing. And 4 points is not a lot of points to give up. I know the series has been tight the last few years, but I'm willing to take South Carolina and give about 4 points.
Well, and I think because of the quarterback situation at Tennessee, the team doesn't seem to have as much faith in is playing this game, and I don't think that's a good thing for the Volunteers.
Yeah, I look, South Carolina could be a team, not only did they beat Georgia, but that's a team that's also going to host Clemson. to end the season, and they're going to also host Appalachian State in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, they're playing with a lot of confidence right now.
Yeah, that's going to be that's a team to keep an eye on that could come into play with some of these other matchups as far as the playoffs or maybe even Appalachian's chance. Do you give Appalachian State? I mean, if App State were to upset South Carolina and remain undefeated, you would think they're going to get into that New Year's Six game.
I think they're the favorite to do so right now because they can beat South Carolina. App State's really good.
Yes.
I think they App State is a top 25 football team at the bottom of the top 25,
Sure.
but that's a legit football team, and they're getting better.
By the way, with Mac Jones a quarterback with Alabama against Arkansas, how do you look at a game like that?
I think they're going to absolutely kill Arkansas because Mac Jones is auditioning for next year's job.
Yes.
I know they've got surprise, they've got a 5-star recruit waiting in the wings, but this is a chance for Mac Jones to show what he can do. Arkansas can't stop the run at all. And I think Alabama's going to murder him. To me, this line is actually too low, and I'm probably going to lay the points with Alabama in this game.
All right, the Tide, 32-point favorite, so Tua out. And not a surprise either because the last couple of years, Alabama has won because of their backup quarterbacks, and Tua has now shown to be a little injury-prone. It's not going to prevent Miami from taking him number 1 overall,
No.
but still, that might be a concern to keep an eye on because that was my concern with Marcus Mariota when he was coming out. And you got to keep these guys healthy, especially today. We take a look around the landscape of the NFL. It's so hard that these quarterbacks, what they got to deal with. And he's already kind of becoming an injury-prone quarterback in college.
Well, yeah, but they'll give him a couple weeks off here, and he'll be ready for the big
For the
games down
LSU
the
game.
stretch.
Yeah, that's the one that they need to have him healthy. All right, I like Kentucky, by the way, against Missouri. Missouri has not won straight up or against the spread on the road this year. Kentucky, meanwhile, desperate for a win. They're 3-0-1 against the spread at home.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about going against Missouri off an embarrassing loss last week, though. They're going to come to play here, and they might just be too good for Kentucky.
Yeah, keep an eye on the fact that star tight end for Missouri may not play. That could be something to keep an eye on. Let's now move over to the Big Ten. This is the other game that I'm going to kind of parlay in a way with Auburn, and that's Wisconsin. They're a 5-1 money line play.
I don't think they're beating Ohio State.
I hear you.
But can they stay within 2 touchdowns? Yeah. And you're actually, I think, catching a little value with Wisconsin at this number now because of the loss last week. But Wisconsin, another one of those teams that fits that rushing stat profile and is getting a bunch of points. And if you play those, if you actually play them blind at this time of year, you win more than you lose.
Yeah, Wisconsin and Ohio State have played. Let's take a look at their last 6 matchups. 5 of them have been decided by 7 points or less. The only one that wasn't was the 59-0 championship game result back in 2014. Keep in mind that these two teams played again in the 2017 title game, which Ohio State won by 6. First-ranked defense Wisconsin against first-ranked defense Ohio State. Everybody's going to talk about Chase Young, potentially the first pick in the draft. If it's not Tua, I'm sure it'll be Tua. And then you've got Chris Orr and that linebacking crew from Wisconsin. So I think Wisconsin rebounds and gives Ohio State all they can handle.
Yeah, so do I. Wisconsin, what they have to do is put last week behind them, obviously. But if they can go out there and pull the upset here, last week won't matter much.
Michigan and Notre Dame, and I have about 3 games or 4 games this year. I have gone against Michigan in whether it's a 5-star. I loved Wisconsin against them. I also had Army to win outright against Michigan. And this is actually going to be the first, and last week I liked Penn State, not as a top pick, but this is going to be the first time that I really feel confident about Michigan. By the way, this is my favorite college football team. I just like the way that they rebounded last week.
They did.
They showed some heart that I hadn't seen all year, and they didn't turn the ball over, which, again, if they can eliminate the turnovers against the number 1 ranked turnover margin team in the country, Notre Dame, then I think they're going to win this football game.
Well, they match up well with them, and I don't think there's any question that they can win the game. The one thing that you've got to worry about if you're a Michigan guy is that one really bad stretch that they can't seem to avoid in these big games. And last week, I know they came back, but, you can't fall behind 21-0 against Penn
No.
State. They were really bad early in that game. So, and at the end of the game, the guy drops the pass that
Yep.
could have sent the game into overtime. It just has not been a good year for Michigan. And while they're a very quality football team, I just don't trust them right now.
Interesting note: Jim Harbaugh, who has lost consecutive games during his tenure, has never lost consecutive games before November. Notre Dame is turned into a 1-point favorite. I believe that's where they are right now. Michigan, I think, started as a 1-point favorite.
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Michigan has covered 4 straight at home against Notre Dame, and the home team has won 5 straight in the series. Of course, Notre Dame won last year, week 1, against Michigan. This is one of my top picks of the week, and that's going to be Penn State, Michigan State. Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with the fact that Penn State's won 3 of 5 Power 5 games by 7 points or less. I completely get that. I also get that Michigan State has owned this series the last few years, winning outright as a 13 and 10-point dog. But Michigan State just has looked awful this year. Their offensive line is a mess, and Penn State's got one of the best defenses in the country.
Well, it's a spot where I want to look at Michigan State because Penn State's coming up a really big game, and Michigan State needs a good performance, but they can't run the football. And if they can't run, that's what they need to set up their passing game, which isn't that good anyway. And you just wonder where the Michigan State points are going to come from if they fall behind. Now, if Michigan State gets up early in this game, then Penn State's going to have trouble. And
I agree.
Penn State's going to have big trouble on their hands. So this to me is one of those live betting games where you look to see what's happening early. If Michigan State gets out to a good start, I think they pull the upset. Otherwise, I like Penn State. So watch early and see what happens.
Yeah. Also, what kind of another reason I felt confident a little bit more than I would have a month ago with Penn State in this spot was how James Franklin, historically not good on the road, and yet last time in this spot at Iowa came through. So that was a big win for him and this football team. Makes me a little bit more confident. Michigan State's lost the last 2 games this season by a 72-10 margin.
Yeah, there's no way Michigan State's on my card.
All right. By the way, Indiana-Nebraska is interesting because
it is an interesting game.
Yeah, Nebraska's a 2-point favorite. There's a bunch of injuries, especially with the quarterback situation, to keep an eye on. I like this kid Penix, though, and I like the offensive coordinator, DeBoer, who came over from Fresno State, coached under Jeff Tedford. They're doing a really nice job. He's doing a really nice job with this offense. Allen, of course, has coached up the defense. I think Indiana's just been a better team than Nebraska this year.
I completely agree. And Nebraska still makes a lot of problems on the offensive line. I think Indiana can go in and win this game. I don't know that I'm going to play it, but Indiana certainly got my attention this week as a dog.
Indiana 3-1 straight out, 3-0-1 against the spread in their last 4 this year. Nebraska not only dealing with Martinez trying to come back from an injury, but one of their top running backs, Maurice Washington, is no longer with the team. And their freshman sensation wide receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson, is banged up, may not play. We don't know if he does. He won't be 100%. Keep an eye on a couple of those injuries. Let's now move on to actually a couple more in the Big Ten. Iowa and Northwestern, big spread. I can get it because Northwestern's offense is terrible. But Pat Fitzgerald seems to have Kirk Ferentz number. This is usually, look, Northwestern has beaten him 3 straight years. Iowa, they don't have an explosive offense, and they just lost their number 1 wide receiver, Brandon Smith, to an injury.
Yeah, and Iowa's going in the wrong direction. They're going to have their hands full here with the Wildcats.
Homecoming for Northwestern. They have not covered at home this year. Iowa 12-3 ATS last 15 is a road favorite, but they haven't covered their last 3 games this year.
Right.
So I'm actually going to take Northwestern in the points. I think this will be one of those ugly Iowa-Northwestern old school games.
I would agree with that. Not going to be fun to watch.
No. Minnesota, that's the darling team for
there
me
you go.
In the Big Ten, and I'm just going to keep riding them. They have won 4 straight. They've covered 4 straight this year. They have won their last 3 by a 116-31 margin. Nobody talks about how good their defense is. And when Josh Jackson, who's going to return from Maryland, has to play good defenses, he doesn't look very good.
Well, he's not very good. He wasn't very good at his prior school, and he's not very good here. Minnesota's on a roll right now. Their team speed on defense is really something to behold. This is an SEC-style defense with the team speed that Minnesota has, and I like them over the win total this year, and that looks like one of the easier winners of my life.
And, yeah, Minnesota, 16-point favorite versus Penn State next week. What a huge
Yeah,
game that is. They
they,
host was
they do have to be careful about looking
Yeah,
past Maryland.
absolutely. That's the one thing that worries me. They host Wisconsin, the last game of the season. That, of course, will be huge. Number one leading tackler, Kamal Martin, is dealing with a knee injury. Keep an eye on that. He may not be able to play. Anthony McFarland returns to the lineup, the explosive running back for Maryland. And Minnesota does have a little revenge on their minds. Maryland has beaten them the last 2 years. All right. Liberty, a 7-point favorite against Rutgers. As a New Jersey native and a Rutgers fan, they need to hire Greg Schiano fast. And maybe they need another embarrassing loss because I think they're going to get it. Hugh Freeze, Stephen Calvert, Antonio Gandy-Golden. They've got some. I mean, Calvert is in his last 5 games has a 14-0 TD interception ratio. He had a great game against Buffalo. They've won some games against teams I don't even think Rutgers can beat. I know it's embarrassing for them to be a 7-point dog at home, but I'm sorry.
Justified.
I would definitely go with Liberty in this one.
Well, Rutgers has shown no interest in playing football right now.
And I kind of think that even though they haven't lost by like 50, I think that's just because the teams that they're playing know they're going to beat Rutgers and they just don't care.
No, I have no idea what Rutgers is going to do, and I don't know why Schiano would take the job. They have no chance to win in the Big Ten.
All right, Illinois, Purdue. Just wanted to mention that because Jack Plummer has been playing really well the last few weeks. And freshman David Bell picking up the slack for Rondell Moore, who's out again. But Illinois is coming off the big win against Wisconsin. Yeah. And if they're going to go to a bowl, they have to win this game. They do get Rutgers and Northwestern at home, but this is that type of game that if they don't win it, they're probably not going to get to a bowl.
No, and it's a real tough spot for Illinois coming off the big upset. This is a bounce spot for the Illini.
ACC, Clemson against a backup quarterback in Boston College. This one could be ugly. It's a huge point spread, as deservedly so. This is not the game that I'm anticipating Clemson's going to have to worry about.
No. Clemson will win by whatever they want.
All right. Duke of North Carolina is good for the hoops. Football, I don't know, but Duke's won 3 straight. Mac Brown has owned Duke in his career. And last chance for some of these seniors at North Carolina to beat Duke. They're going to be motivated. I think they're a better team anyway. They host Virginia next week. I like North Carolina in that one.
Well, the problem for me, though, is coming off that unbelievable game last week, which went forever. Mm-hmm. And those are tough to rebound from, especially when you lose them. So I don't like the spot for North Carolina, although I do agree they're the better football team.
What do you think about the new rule, overtime rule?
Well, I happen to have Virginia Tech plus 3.5 last week, so I love the new rule.
Yeah, and I had North Carolina, so I didn't. Yeah, so that's pretty much how it is. But yeah, I don't know. To me, I understand what they're trying to do, but I don't like. Yes,
I don't like gimmicks. But the other thing is, look, you got to end these games at some point.
That's the thing. But it does appear a little too gimmicky. Miami Pitt's one of my top picks this week. I really like him against Miami. You're talking about the team that is leading the nation with 36 sacks against the team that's 127th in the nation in sacks allowed. Pitt should dominate the line of scrimmage. Miami hasn't been on the road since week 2. Perry's banged up. DJ Dallas is banged up. Thomas suspended. Pinckney on defense looks like he's not going to play. Pitt's just a better team than Miami, and Miami's looking ahead next week to Florida State.
And Miami just is not getting it together under Diaz.
No.
It's just not going real well. And the thing about Pittsburgh, though, is, boy, could you ever play 60 minutes? Because they just don't. I mean, you look at 2 games now, the Duke game and last week's game against Syracuse, where they had the teams blown out.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't blow teams
out. Well, they blew the lead against Duke and almost lost that game. And last week, if that fumble doesn't get overturned, they might have lost that game. You can't do that. I mean, you have to finish teams off, and Pittsburgh has not shown the ability to do that.
Yeah, and they also, of course, with injuries, but they barely got by Delaware. So,
yeah, well, that game was just a dead spot. But Delaware can play a little bit.
But that's their MO. They don't blow teams out. That's the scary thing when you're giving even just 5 points.
Absolutely, it's why I won't be doing it.
All right. Virginia, I like. I think that, look, I just think they're the team that's going to represent the Coastal this year. They're a 3-point favorite against Louisville, 3.5. They're 2-0 straight up and against the spread on the road under Bronco Mendenhall in his fourth year. They beat Pitt earlier this year in this spot. I like Virginia in this one.
Tough game. I won't get involved in this one. Louisville's, I mean, Satterfield's doing a tremendous job there.
Yes.
They've improved so much. And Louisville's not taking a back seat to anybody right now. They're not afraid. They're certainly playing a lot harder than they did last year when they were just mailing it in the second half of the season. So Louisville's not a team I want to fade right now.
Florida State will be hosting Miami next week in that spot. Or in this spot, they have dropped 6 straight covers the week before they play Miami. Keep an eye on it. On that, Syracuse, the only ACC team without an ACC win. DeVito's banged up. The backup's banged up. They've lost the last 2 games by just 13 points, even though they've dropped 4 out of 5 covers. FSU has covered 7 of 8 against losing teams. The number 2 tackler, Dontavius Jackson, will not play for Florida State, who's won and covered their last 2 at home. It's a 10-point spread. It's a big spread.
It's too much for me.
Yeah, I'm staying away from that game.
I don't trust Florida State at all. And if you've watched Syracuse, this is just not their season. Let's put it that way.
It looks like Babers needs an athletic quarterback like Dungy. That's what it looks like to me.
They've missed him about as much as any team can miss a player because the drop-off to DeVito has been huge, and DeVito doesn't look like he has any confidence right now. And the backup, I know they scored a touchdown and made it interesting late against Pitt, but he just doesn't look very good.
Now, at this time of year, like we've seen the last couple of weeks, you get these upsets that come out of nowhere. It's not easy to find them, but I decided there's a game this week that I'm going to take a chance on with the money line at 11-1 and see if they could pull off the upset in a game that nobody's expecting. And I might get embarrassed, and it happens. I'm not putting big money on it, but I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice on Kansas State against Oklahoma. I'm a big Chris Kleiman fan. Interesting enough, Kansas State is 5th nationally in pass defense. They've only surrendered 3 touchdown passes. That hopefully will keep them in the game against Oklahoma, who struggled a little bit with their in-state rivals, Kansas, a few weeks ago. It's a big point spread, but again, 11-1 on the money line. These things happen. It's just a gut feeling that maybe Kansas State might be able to hang in there with the Sooners, so I'll go ahead and take Kansas State in the shocker.
I won't try and talk you out of it.
And I get it. By the way, Texas is a 1-point favorite against TCU, and I completely understand why. But they're a better team than TCU.
They are a better team. Look, I've said this all year, and I think I got this one right. TCU is just not that good. And I'll just make a little observation here. Look, Gary Patterson's a great head coach. We know that. But I've always been of the belief that with very few exceptions, especially now, coaches sometimes stay too long in one place. I mean, there are exceptions. Belichick can probably coach for the rest of his life with the Patriots, and they'll just keep winning for the rest of his life. But in college, we saw it with Beamer, who's a fantastic coach, but the Tech program started getting stale under him. Now, it has gotten better because Justin Fuente's been a disappointment, but it has just gotten stale under Beamer. And I think TCU has kind of reached that point with Gary Patterson. And that's not to knock his coaching ability because he's an outstanding coach. But maybe he's just been in the same spot too long. It's not like the old days where coaches stayed at one location for 30 years until they died, and then somebody else took over. The game's changed since then, and I just think TCU needs an injection of new life.
Sure, I hear you. Matter of fact, he's the type of coach that, because how good he is on the defensive side of the ball, if he wanted to, he could be a top coordinator in the NFL for a couple of years and then land a head coaching job.
Well,
I think he's that good.
But the thing is, here's the downside, though. You can't fire Greg Patterson.
No.
Or Gary Patterson. You can't do it.
No.
I mean, he's an institution at TCU, and he is a great coach.
Yeah.
I just think that maybe they've kind of leveled off, and they're just going to be a middle of the Big 12 team, and that's about it.
Well, you know what it is, too. It's the same thing with Michigan. Sometimes it's as easy as they need a quarterback. They haven't had, since Boykin, I think, when they had that electric offense about 5 years ago, he doesn't get quarterbacks there. And
it's a defense. They get defensive guys.
Yeah, and that's I think as soon as he could get another quarterback in there, then maybe they'll start competing again for a title. But yeah,
Easier said than done. And the
yeah,
other thing is, TCU is now in a league where they're just not, they were the big fish
that's
in the
right.
Mountain West. They're never going to be the big fish in this league because Oklahoma and Texas are.
All right, Iowa State is going to be one of
Oh,
my
man.
top picks this week. I love the way they're playing right now. They were actually my pick in the beginning of the season to play in the Big 12 championship game. They still have a shot for that, but obviously they got to take care of Oklahoma State. Sanders, the freshman, has looked awful lately. I think Iowa State's a good play here, minus the 10.5.
And the team's on a roll right now. That's not a team you want to get in the way of.
Let's move on to the Pac-12. We got the game tonight. USC Colorado. The Trojans have won 13 straight against Colorado, but they are a banged-up football team. USC's they're going to be without their top 3 rushers. They're going to be without their safety. They're going to be without their freshman. Looks like they might be without their freshman star defensive end Drake Jackson. Rector's out. So there's a lot of injuries there. Colorado's played pretty good at home this year. I think this is going to be one of those games that Colorado's going to be in it. I don't know whether or not they can close the deal, though.
I would agree with that. I think this is a competitive game, and USC is still not the most trustworthy team in the road.
Yes.
Not real happy with the way Oregon's playing, Colorado's playing right now, but I'll kind of toss out the Washington State game last week. It was just a bad spot for them, and it was raining like crazy in Pullman all day. It was the wrong place at the wrong time for the Buffaloes. This is a big game for them.
Yeah, USC 0-3 straight up on the road this year. So and they host Oregon next week. So if USC wins this game, and Oregon wins, that'd be a nice matchup. Next
it is, but USC could look past this game.
Keep an eye on that. Also, keep an eye on injuries in the Arizona-Stanford game. Stanford down to their third-string quarterback, Jack West, who did not look good against UCLA.
No.
And Arizona, boy, they've had a couple of clunkers in the second half the last couple of weeks. I actually think Arizona kind of gets back to looking like they did earlier this season, especially if Jack West plays.
And the flip side is I think Stanford really got humiliated last week and might come to play tonight. That was an embarrassing performance last week. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a game I put an X through that game immediately.
Yeah, they only had 6 healthy offensive linemen last week. Stanford did against UCLA. Speaking of the Bruins, they got a little healthier in that win with the quarterback coming back. Joshua Kelly finally had a big game. They're a 4-point home dog against Arizona State.
Yeah, and they might be running into Arizona State at the wrong time because the Sun Devils coming off a game where they weren't real good. And Herm Edwards will have this team ready to play this week. I think the line is an indicator here with Arizona State. Pretty good favorite on the road, and I think ASU gets this one.
Boy, where would Cal be if Garbers were still healthy? What a shame.
Now they're down to the third stringer.
And you know what? As bad as Modsters played, this might actually be an improvement. But the kid's a true freshman, and he has to go play on the road against Utah.
And Oregon is just not giving up anything.
Utah's
not giving up much of anything. They're healthy again. Utah by whatever they want.
Yeah, they've covered and won their last 3 by a 111-23 margin. 4th-ranked total defense against a true freshman. Tough spot for the Bears, who have covered all 3 games on the road this year, getting 21.5. Washington State's a 14-point dog at Oregon.
Yeah, and that's the game I wanted to talk.
What was that?
That's the game I wanted to talk about because, Washington State seemed to find something defensively last week. They've got new, co-defensive coordinators since Clace left, and they played well last week. And Oregon has to be very careful here because they're coming off a big game win, and they've got another big game coming up.
Yep, at USC.
You do not want to take Washington State for granted because Wazoo can throw a scare into you. This might be a good game.
And there are some very interesting stats/trends that favor Washington State in this game. They have beaten Oregon the last 4 years. They have covered Oregon the last 9 years. And get this one. This is one of those Mark Lawrence specials. They have covered 15 straight games as dogs of 11 or more when they take on a team coming off a win.
Wow.
So how about
that team is coming off its biggest win of the year.
All right, so that's
because coming back to beat Washington on the road, and Oregon gets away from what they've been doing, which was blowing games in the fourth quarter on the Cristobal, and they win one last week that way. This is a dangerous letdown spot for Oregon.
Look, there are a lot of fans across the country, especially Oregon and Utah, that outside of week-to-week wagering want to see Oregon, Utah, Pac-12 championship, one loss apiece, winner gets to the playoffs.
Well, I don't think the winner's getting to the playoffs, unfortunately. They'll need some help. But Oregon has a chance. If Oregon can win out, they might get the fourth spot. I don't think Utah will.
All right, let's go to the AAC, which again has been a very, very good, without question, the best group of 5 conference of the season.
Yeah.
Tulane and Navy is a really good one. Now, Tulane maybe was overdue for a clunker when they got beat up by Memphis. But the thing that concerns me is the running backs, the 2 kids that really make this engine run besides McMillan, a quarterback.
Yeah.
Both of these kids are banged up. We're not sure if either one of them are going to play. And they got to take on a Navy team who's looking every bit as good as the old Navy teams from a couple of years ago because Marquise Perry's been dynamic under center. Mm-hmm. They've won their last 3 games by an 80-20 margin. I don't know. Look, if I know the running backs are not in the game for Tulane, I'm definitely going Navy. If they get one of those running backs back, especially defined, the kid's electric behind that behind McMillan, then I'm thinking maybe I'd stay away from the game.
Well, Tulane is really athletic, and they showed that against Army, where they just destroyed Army's option. The final score in that game was misleading. Tulane completely dominated.
They did whatever they wanted to do offensively. Yep.
Right. Now, Navy's better than Army, but I don't know how much better than Army. So Tulane's still going to have the better athletes in this game, and I think I lean Green Wave in this one.
Okay. And by the way, Navy, which will be good in a couple of weeks, will be at Notre Dame. So that'll be a good one. Navy might be able to give Notre Dame all they can handle. Now, here's a good one. Now, this is one of I've struck it both games this year when Temple's been a dog, and I'm going back again for a third time. Temple's an 11-point home dog against Central Florida. Temple is 18-6 ATS as dogs in the last 24. They've covered 8 out of 9 as a home dog, including winning both in that spot this year, beating Maryland, beating Memphis. You got a Central Florida team who's lost the last 2 games on the road against Pitt and Cincinnati. And they're going to have to, as a Florida team, they're going to have to play a night game. The temps should be in the mid-50s, 60% chance of rain. That's going to negate their team's speed. I really like Temple to cover this game.
I'm a little worried the bloom is off the rose for Temple. I don't like their offense. I think Russo's really average quarterback. And UCF has had some time to prepare for this one, so they worry me in this spot. Temple really got their ass kicked last week, and we'll see how they react to that. But that's a lot of points.
Yeah, and you got a freshman quarterback, too, because he's been in this spot the 2 games against when he's had to step up on the road in competition against Pitt and against Cincinnati. He hasn't played very well. And Temple still has a pretty decent defense. Not as good as they've been recently, but still a pretty decent defense.
Should be a fun game.
Yep. And that's a night game. Also, a couple of quick things I wanted to mention from a few of these other games. East Carolina, I like the job Mike Houston's doing there. I think he's going to get the job done in time. They're a 3-point dog, 2.5 against Central Florida. I like him in that spot. And
they're playing South Florida.
South Florida, excuse me. And I also like the points with UMass against UConn because UConn has not beaten an FBS team since 2017, even though UMass might not even be considered an FBS team. But they haven't been favored since 2015. And they're given 10 points.
I saw a stat where they're 1-19 as a favorite.
Yeah, matter of fact, here they're 4-19 versus non-conference teams. 0-8, last 8 as a favorite when they are in the revenge spot. Don't forget UMass beat them last year. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're doing as a 10-point favorite.
Well, I mean, if you've seen UMass defense, you know what? It's the worst defense I've ever seen. But I would take UMass in this game.
And by the way, that's another reason why I think Liberty should be able to handle Rutgers because Rutgers struggled against UMass for a half week 1. All right, Mountain West Conference, Air Force, Utah State should be a real good football game.
Great game.
But Air Force is going through some off-the-field shenanigans because they have the 3rd player that'll be court-martialed for cocaine use, and their star quarterback, Hammond, is dealing with a shoulder injury, even though Mike Schmidt had a good game last week in his place.
Yeah, Utah State is maybe a little bit of a disappointment based on where they hoped they would be this year, but they're still a real quality football team. That's a good game. I don't know who's going to win it.
Also, a game that I think has a chance for an upset, Colorado State and Fresno State. The kid, Patrick O'Brien, is actually doing a pretty good job filling in for Hill. But Marvin Kinsey is a good running back. I like the fact they get Warren Jackson back at wide receiver. He's been out for a couple of games. Then he went out against New Mexico, and matter of fact, he missed a couple of games. And against New Mexico, 214 and 2 touchdowns. And true freshman Dante Wright is having a fantastic season. I think this is one of those games where Colorado State might be able to steal one or at least make it close as almost a 5-1 money line play.
Yeah, it's a big number. Although Fresno will continue to get better as the season goes along. Tedford's an excellent coach.
Sanchez gets a big upset every year, but he doesn't get 2. Do you? What's his status over there at UNLV?
I don't think he'll be back.
Okay. Yeah, I like San Diego State in that game. They're a 13.5-point favorite. They've won and covered 4 straight on the road, and they get revenge after being upset by UNLV last year. Also, New Mexico, Hawaii, and I got
New Mexico. Stick a fork in New Mexico. Davies going to be gone.
He'll be gone too.
Yeah, I think there's no question about it. And
but remember, Hawaii can't cover when they're a favorite, though. That's the problem.
No, I mean it's in the number. But Hawaii should win the game, and New Mexico hasn't shown up. New Mexico, they have no quarterback. They just don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, the one of the starters they just suspended, and so the other kid, he has won a game this year, but yeah, that's been a problem there for a while.
Yeah, he beat New Mexico State.
Yeah, and San Jose State could be an interesting play. They're a 9-point dog against a struggling Army team
Army is struggling.
Yep, they're at Air Force next week. San Jose State's 2-0-1 ATS on the road. Don't forget they beat Arkansas. And Army beat San Jose State last year 52-3. So somehow I think San Jose State will be up for that game.
I think San Jose State's got a good chance to at least cover this game. And Army's going in the wrong direction right now.
Yeah, tougher schedule, no question, from last year.
Well, they've just lost. They lost the Tulane game. They got killed.
Yep. And
the final margin was 9, but it wasn't. Then they lose got shut down completely by Western Kentucky.
Yep. And
then last week, Georgia State comes back and beats them in the fourth quarter. So Army is a fade team right now.
Now, the good thing at least is those teams are actually having good seasons. Western Kentucky and the Conference USA might be one of the surprise teams in the group of 5.
And I like Western Kentucky this week. But here's the thing. Army right now is in a bad spot mentally. This was a team that coming out of the Michigan game and then winning a couple of games after that, they're looking at possibly being a one-loss. They really were talking about it.
Yeah, like
we could be
a
one-loss team that ends up having a chance to play on January 1st. I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
So their dreams have gotten away from them, and all they've got now is the Commander-in-Chief trophy. They've got the Air Force and Navy games, and that's all that matters to them at this point.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they're going to get to a bowl.
And that Air Force game is next week. So maybe they won't be as focused against a team that they destroyed last year.
Right.
So that's a possibility, yeah.
No, and Brennan's done a good job with the San Jose State team. They play real hard.
Yep.
And I think that could be a good ball game.
Only one other time has Jeff Monken gone through a 4-game losing streak, and that was when he lost 5 straight in 2015.
This year's group is just not as effective. They're not athletic at all. And other teams have figured that out. If you can spread them out a little bit with their option, they're just not able to accomplish much because they have no speed.
It seems to me like we both like Western Kentucky, and why not? They're 4-0 straight up ATS last 4, giving up just 38 total points. They're at Marshall. They're 15th ranked total defense in the country, led by that defensive end D'Angelo Malone, who's got 9 sacks and leads the nation.
That guy's playing in the NFL.
Yep, he leads the nation with 16 tackles for loss. Marshall, meanwhile, 3-10 ATS, less 13 is a home favorite, including 0-2 this year. Yeah, I like Western Kentucky getting 5.
And Marshall got a gift last week. I know it cost Lane Kiffin $5,000, but it was probably worth it. I wasn't involved in the game, so it's not a sour grapes type of thing, but Florida Atlantic got screwed against Marshall last week. The officiating in that game was horrible. And it basically all went against FAU. So that was a lucky win by Marshall.
All right. And by the way, they also have their safety who's suspended for domestic battery this past week. In the MAC, I just love how a couple of these teams, Ball State, What a beautiful season it's been for that program. They're a 2-point favorite against a disappointing Ohio team that's ranked 115th in total defense. You're in a revenge spot. They've covered 4 straight Ball State. They've won 3 straight. I like Ball State in this spot. I mean, where's the respect?
Why not? Yeah. Listen, Ball State, you go back to the Indiana game on opening weekend.
And that was a good game.
It was a very competitive game,
Yes.
and you look at that and go, hey, you know what? Ball State might be pretty good. And
they played
they've
North
got a good
Carolina
chance to win
State
this game.
tough.
Yep.
And they also played FAU tough. And that's what got me thinking about them as soon as they started to play outside of that outside the conference. And then all of a sudden, they've been kicking butt. They're 5-1 against the spread this year. Ohio is 1-5 against the spread this year.
Well,
so that's,
Ohio never replaced Willett.
And
I mean, he was just such a bull of a running back, and they just, Nathan Rourke has not been the same without his big back.
Eastern Michigan, they lose their starting quarterback, and then Preston Hutchinson comes in and throws for 357 yards in the upset against Western Michigan. They're 16-3 against the spread. Their last 19 as a road dog. Toledo, both quarterbacks are banged up. Hey, I just love Chris Creighton and Eastern Michigan in these types of spots.
Yeah, EMU can kind of get themselves back into consideration for a bowl game if they can win here.
Jim McElwain's doing a great job at Central Michigan. They've covered 6 straight games. They're at Buffalo getting 2.5.
Toss-up game. Buffalo can run the ball. They can't throw it. If Central Michigan can find a way to stop the run, they'll have a good chance.
NIU's a 22-point favorite against Akron.
Wow.
Akron hasn't covered a game all year, and they're down to their backup quarterback, who's a true freshman, with Cato Nelson suspended. Unfortunately, NIU has lost their 2 top linebackers for the season in just, a 2 or 3 week span. May have to go to their backup quarterback here, but Akron just doesn't cover games.
No, but can you lay 3 touchdowns with Northern Illinois?
That's true. And
not me.
And finally, in the Sun Belt, Georgia State, who I was talking about, is having a fantastic season. Just recently, they've beaten Arkansas State, Coastal Carolina, and Army in a row. They won against Tennessee on the road week 1. They get App State in a few weeks at home. They're a 1-point favorite against Troy.
Great matchup. I mean, it really is. I think Troy's a little better football team, but Georgia State's on a roll right now. Not anxious to go against them.
Tough that they do lose one of their top defenders, linebacker Ed Kearney, to an ACL injury. So hopefully they'll get on without him. Arkansas State's a 11.5-point favorite against Texas State. And Georgia Southern is a 14.5-point favorite against New Mexico State.
Yeah.
A couple of things I was looking at this game. I think this may not be a bad upset pick because you got New Mexico State coming off a bye. You got Georgia Southern coming off an overtime win. You've got Georgia Southern playing on Thursday at home against Appalachian State. So there's a lot of things and they're without their number 1 running back, Georgia Southern, and their freshman offensive lineman passed away this past week.
It's been a rough stretch for them. And, aside from all that stuff, their option just isn't working this year. Shea Wirtz is not playing at the level he did last year, and they're struggling to score points.
Yeah, he's probably nowhere near 100%. He missed some games.
No, I'm sure he's not.
Yeah, and it's just not clicking. All right, Dave, how's everything else going on at covers.com?
Oh, everything's good. Just trying to pick some winners and doing the daily grind.
Dave, I appreciate it. We look forward to talking to you again next week.
Sounds good, Greg.